We often speak of companies, entities formed by many. But what if a single individual holds the vision, the resources, and the desire to build something? Can such an entity exist, legally recognized, yet distinct from its sole creator? This seems to be the question we are invited to explore today. So, what is this one-person company? It appears to be a structure where a single person stands as the sole shareholder, the owner. Yet, it is not merely their personal venture. It is granted a separate legal identity, much like a traditional company. Think of it perhaps as a sole proprietorship given a more formal corporate skin. Why might such a concept arise? Could it be to make the path of entrepreneurship less daunting for those who wish to act alone, especially when starting out? What benefits might one find in this OPC structure? The text suggests several advantages. Firstly, the company is legally separate from its owner. Does this separation offer protection? Perhaps the owner's personal wealth remains untouched if the company faces financial difficulties, what we call limited liability. Secondly, does this corporate form lend credibility, making it easier to secure loans or partnerships? And crucially, can the business continue even if the sole owner is no longer able to manage it, perhaps through a nominated successor? Finally, is it simpler to establish and operate compared to needing multiple partners? However, is this path without its shadows? The text hints at certain limitations. The very essence of an OPC is its singularity, only one owner. What happens if that owner wishes to bring others into the fold later? Some rules suggest difficulty in conversion to other types of companies. And what of the nominee, the designated successor? Are there constraints on who they can be? Furthermore, could there be complexities if the owner also seeks to lend money to the company they own? These seem like important questions to consider alongside the benefits. Now, having considered the general idea, let us turn our gaze across different lands. How does this OPC concept manifest itself in practice? Does it look the same everywhere? The text proposes comparing practices in Asia and Europe. To understand these differences, we might focus on specific aspects: the process of setting up such a company, the required initial investment, the role of the nominee, the possibility of changing the company's structure later, and how ownership passes on. Let us examine some examples. Let us first consider Bangladesh. Their laws, as amended, allow for OPCs. However, the process of incorporation seems to follow the same steps as for other companies, which might be seen as somewhat complex. Interestingly, there are limits on the size of the company, minimum capital, and maximum turnover. A nominee is required, but the owner retains the right to change them. If the owner passes away, the shares can go to the nominee or family. And importantly, it seems possible to convert this OPC into a larger type of company if needed. What does this tell us about the balance between simplicity and regulation in Bangladesh? Next, let us look at Singapore. Here, the law allows for a single member and director. The incorporation process involves standard requirements, including share capital. What is notable is the requirement for 2 nominees, a primary and an alternate. This seems designed to ensure continuity even if the sole director is incapacitated. If the director dies, the nominee director manages until the shares transfer to the heirs. However, the text suggests there isn't a clear rule for converting an OPC based solely on its turnover, unlike some other places. Does this reflect a different approach to managing growth? In China, the Company Amendment Act of 2018 provides the framework. The minimum capital must be paid up front, and the owner cannot establish another OPC. A single nominee is required, who steps in if the owner becomes incapacitated. What is interesting here is the automatic conversion rule. If the OPC's capital reaches the threshold for a public limited company, it converts automatically. This seems quite different from Bangladesh's approach. Does this encourage rapid growth, or might it be seen as less flexible for the owner's long-term plans? India's Companies Act 2013 also recognizes OPCs. A minimum capital of 1 million rupees is required. A nominee is necessary, and their consent must be filed initially. Upon the owner's death, the nominee holds the shares before passing them to the legal heirs. Now, the conversion rules seem quite specific. After 2 years, or if capital or turnover exceeds certain amounts, the OPC can become a private or public company. Does this structured approach provide clarity for the owner regarding future expansion, or does it impose a potential hurdle? Finally, let us consider Malaysia. Their law allows an individual to be both the owner and director. The minimum age is 18, with no upper limit, suggesting inclusivity. Interestingly, the text doesn't explicitly state a minimum share capital for the OPC itself, though it would follow general private company rules. The handling of succession seems less defined by a specific nominee clause within the OPC structure, potentially relying more on broader inheritance laws. This suggests a different way of ensuring continuity. What does this imply about the intended use and governance of OPCs in Malaysia? Having examined these diverse examples, what patterns emerge? It seems the core idea, a single owner with a separate legal entity and limited liability, is common. Yet, the details differ considerably. We see variations in the required starting capital, the specifics of the nominee arrangement, the rules governing how the company can evolve or change its structure, and the procedures for setting it up. Why do these differences exist? Do they reflect different economic priorities, cultural contexts, or simply varying stages of legal development? The text suggests that the introduction of OPCs has had a positive impact on economies, citing growth figures in countries like the UK, Singapore, and China. The reasoning seems to be that by making it easier to start a business, OPCs encourage more people to become entrepreneurs. Does this seem plausible? If fewer hurdles exist for starting a venture, might more people take the leap? Could this structure also attract foreign investment or facilitate collaborations between businesses? It seems the potential for economic dynamism is a key argument presented. So, we have journeyed through the concept of the one-person company, examining its promise, its challenges, and its varied manifestations across different lands. It seems a tool designed to empower the individual entrepreneur, yet one that carries inherent complexities. The path forward requires careful consideration of these structures, balancing the desire for simplicity with the need for adaptability and growth. Perhaps the true wisdom lies not in finding a single perfect model, but in understanding the trade-offs involved in each.